I never thought I'd go to war over 10 feet of gravel, but that's exactly what happened. And yeah, it got petty, real petty. The kind of petty where a grown man ends up arguing about property lines in a bathrobe at 7 a.m. while staring at a pile of mulch he can't move. So here's the deal. My place sits on a corner lot. Nothing fancy, just a small 2-bedroom with a wraparound gravel driveway that I've used for years for my landscaping business. Truck, trailer, equipment, everything had its place, clean, organized, never blocking anyone, never stepping on anyone else's space. I've lived there 8 years, long enough to know every crack in the pavement, every neighbor's dog, every unwritten rule of the street, and the biggest one? You respect boundaries, physical and otherwise. Then the Callahans moved in next door. Now, you ever meet people who walk into a place like they're upgrading it just by breathing the air? Yeah, that was them. Brent Callahan and his wife Elise. New money energy, matching luxury SUVs, talking about elevating the neighborhood, like the rest of us were just background noise. First week they were there, contractors everywhere. New stone patio, modern fencing, outdoor lighting that probably cost more than my truck. And at first, I didn't care. People can spend their money however they want. But then Brent started looking at my driveway like it offended him personally. He'd stand there, arms crossed, just staring, like he was calculating something. I should have trusted that feeling in my gut, because a few days later, I came home and found 2 bright orange cones sitting right on the edge of my driveway, my side of the line. I picked them up, walked them right back over, set them neatly on his lawn, didn't say a word. Thought that would be the end of it, nope. Next morning, there they were again. Same spot. That's when Brent knocked on my door. Big smile, that kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "Hey neighbor," he says, all casual. "We were thinking maybe we could share that section of the driveway. You've got plenty of room, and we host guests pretty often." I just looked at him for a second, trying to figure out if he was serious. "It's not shared," I told him. "It's mine." Smile gone. Just like that. His face tightened up, like I'd just insulted him. "We'll see about that," he muttered. And yeah, that line stuck with me. Because people don't say stuff like that unless they already think they've got a plan. And sure enough, a week later, while I'm out on a job, he makes his move. I pull up that evening and just sit there in my truck for a second, because what I'm looking at doesn't make sense. Fresh black asphalt, smooth, clean, brand new, laid right over a strip of my gravel driveway, connecting his property directly to mine. And then the real kicker, a sleek, modern fence, cutting straight across, about 8 feet into my land, blocking off access like it had always been his. I remember just gripping the steering wheel, thinking, there's no way this is real. But oh, it was real. I marched right over and knocked on his door, heart pounding, trying to keep it together. Elise answers, holding a glass of wine like it's just another normal evening. "Your husband paved over my driveway and built a fence on my property," I said, plain and simple. She didn't even blink, just took a sip and gave me this little smirk. "Brent had a survey done," she said, like she was explaining something obvious to a child. "That section belongs to us. You might want to check your paperwork." That right there, that calm, dismissive tone, that's what really lit the fuse. Because now it wasn't just about space, it was about disrespect. So I went inside, dug out every document I had. Deed, original survey, property map. And yeah, there it was, clear as day, that 10-foot strip. Mine. Always had been. I called Brent, gave him one chance to fix it. "You need to remove the asphalt and the fence," I told him. He actually laughed, like full-on laughed into the phone. "We've improved the property," he said. "If you've got a problem, call a lawyer." And just like that, it wasn't a neighbor dispute anymore. It was a line in the sand. So I did exactly what he said. I called a lawyer. But here's the thing about legal stuff. It takes time. Weeks, sometimes months. And in the meantime, Brent was living like he'd already won. Parking his SUV on that strip every day, hosting dinner parties, string lights glowing along my property like it was some kind of outdoor showroom. And every time I saw it, I felt that same pressure building in my chest. Not anger exactly, something colder, more deliberate. Because if there's one thing I've learned running my own business, it's this. You don't always fight loud. Sometimes you just make your point impossible to ignore. And I still own that land, fence or not, which meant I could use it. And that's when the idea hit me. Not revenge, not exactly, more like a lesson, one he wouldn't forget. The first move happened on a Tuesday morning. I had a delivery scheduled anyway, a dump truck full of mulch for a client job. Normally, I'd have it dropped near the garage, but this time, I gave the driver very specific instructions. Right there, I said, pointing directly at the stolen strip, all of it. The truck tilted back, and suddenly there's this massive pile of dark mulch spilling out, covering every inch of that shiny new asphalt, completely blocking Brent's precious new driveway. I stood there, arms crossed, watching it settle, and right on cue. Here he comes, bathrobe, slippers, pure disbelief on his face. "What the hell is this?" he snapped. I kept my voice calm, polite even. "Just using my property," I said. "You're welcome to use yours." The look he gave me. Yeah, that was the moment I knew this wasn't over. It was just getting started, and honestly, I was ready. Now let me pause the story for a second, because this right here, this whole situation, it's not just about a petty neighbor dispute. It's actually a textbook example of how property conflicts escalate when ego gets involved. According to standard procedure, property boundaries in the U.S. are defined by recorded deeds and certified surveys, not by what someone thinks looks right, not by convenience, and definitely not by whoever pours asphalt the fastest. What Brent did, paving over land and installing a fence without legal confirmation, that's already stepping into what's called encroachment, and trust me, courts do not take that lightly. From a legal perspective, even if someone genuinely believes they own a piece of land, they still can't alter it or block access without verified documentation. Otherwise, they're exposing themselves to liability, fines, and forced removal, sometimes at their own expense, which, spoiler alert, gets expensive fast. But here's where it gets more interesting. This wasn't just about parking space. This is a psychological trap a lot of people fall into when they move into a new environment with a sense of superiority. Brent didn't just want more driveway. He wanted control. He saw my setup, my truck, my business, my lifestyle, and instead of adapting, he tried to reshape the environment to fit his expectations. That's what we call territorial dominance behavior. Small actions at first, like placing cones, testing boundaries, then escalating when there's no immediate pushback. And when I didn't give him what he wanted, that's when it turned into a power play. The lesson here is simple, but most people learn it too late. If you let someone quietly cross a boundary once, they don't see it as compromise, they see it as permission. And Brent? He thought he had already won. He just didn't realize the game wasn't over yet. So yeah, at that point, we weren't just neighbors anymore. We were in a silent standoff, and Brent still thought he was in control, which honestly made what came next even better. That mulch pile? It sat there for 3 full days. Didn't touch it, didn't move it, just let it exist like a big, steaming reminder that you can't just redraw someone else's property line because it suits you. Brent tried everything. Passive-aggressive comments when he saw me outside, loud phone calls about unreasonable neighbors. Even Elise started leaving little notes taped to the fence, stuff like, "This is lowering property values, and please maintain community standards," which was ironic, considering the fence itself was illegal. But I didn't respond, not directly. I just let it simmer, because I had already planned the next step. See, timing matters in situations like this. You don't go all in at once, you escalate. So the following week, I scheduled another delivery, 10 tons of gravel. Not a small pile. I'm talking a full-on mound, the kind that makes you question your life choices if you're standing too close when it drops. Same instructions as before, right there. The driver looked at me like, "You sure?" And I just nodded. Next thing you know, boom, gravel pouring down, covering not just the asphalt, but spreading wide enough to make that whole section completely unusable. And this time, Brent didn't come out in a bathrobe. He came out furious, red-faced, shouting before he even reached me. "You're blocking access. This is illegal." I just leaned against my truck, calm as ever. "It's my property," I said. "I can store materials on it." That's when he called the cops. Now, I'll be honest, most people would get nervous at that point, but I wasn't most people anymore. I had my documents ready, printed, highlighted. I knew exactly where I stood. The officer shows up, takes one look at the situation, fence cutting across, fresh gravel pile, Brent pacing like a man about to combust, and you could tell he'd seen this kind of thing before. He asked for paperwork. I handed over my survey. Brent handed over his. And I swear, I had to fight not to laugh. Because what Brent gave him, it wasn't even a certified survey. It looked like something sketched out with a tape measure and wishful thinking. The officer studied both, nodded slowly, then turned to Brent. "Sir," he said, calm but firm, "this is a civil matter. He's on his property." Brent lost it. "But he's blocking our driveway," he shouted. And the officer just looked at him, deadpan, and said, "Then maybe you shouldn't have built on his." That line, yeah, that one stuck. Because you could feel the shift right there. Brent realized, for the first time, this wasn't going to go his way. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Because the third move, that one wasn't just practical, it was symbolic. A few days later, I had a bright blue porta potty delivered, the kind you see on construction sites, impossible to ignore, impossible to pretend isn't there. And where did it go? Right on the property line, dead center of that disputed strip. I didn't even need it there. My crew had facilities elsewhere. But that wasn't the point. The point was visibility. The point was sending a message without saying a word. And oh, it worked. Brent stopped hosting guests. The string lights went dark. Elise stopped leaving notes. Instead, there was this heavy silence every time I stepped outside, like they were waiting, calculating their next move. And sure enough, about 2 weeks later, I got served papers. Brent was suing me for obstruction, property damage, and loss of use. I read through it once, then again, and just shook my head, because if you're going to start a fight in court, you better be ready to finish it. So I filed a counterclaim, encroachment, illegal construction, property damage, and attached every piece of documentation I had. Photos, timestamps, surveys, even delivery receipts showing exactly where materials were placed on my land. And then we waited. Court day came faster than I expected. Small courtroom, nothing dramatic. But the tension? Yeah, that was real. Brent showed up in a tailored suit, looking confident, like he still believed he could talk his way out of this. Elise sat beside him, arms crossed, avoiding eye contact. When it was my turn, I just told the truth, simple, clear, no theatrics. Presented the deed, the certified survey, explained the sequence of events. Then my surveyor testified, licensed professional, years of experience, walked the judge through the boundary lines like it was second nature. And then, Brent presented his side. When the judge asked about his survey, he hesitated, just for a second, but that was all it took. Turns out, it wasn't an official survey at all, just measurements he'd taken himself, based on what he thought made sense. You could feel the room shift again, that subtle moment when someone realizes they've lost credibility. The judge leaned back, looked over the documents one more time, then delivered the verdict, calm, precise, final. Full restoration of my property, removal of the fence, removal of the asphalt, and Brent, responsible for all associated costs, including my legal fees. Just like that, it was over. No dramatic outburst, no last-minute twist, just consequences catching up, exactly the way they're supposed to. A few days later, crews were back, but this time, tearing everything down. The fence came out first, then the asphalt got broken up and hauled away, piece by piece, until my gravel driveway was back where it belonged. Brent didn't say a word during any of it. Didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge me, just kept his head down. And honestly, that silence said more than anything else could have. Because in the end, it was never really about the driveway. It was about respect, and the moment he decided he didn't have to give it was the moment this whole thing became inevitable. So yeah, that's how a quiet little corner lot driveway turned into a full-blown legal showdown. And if you're thinking, man, that escalated fast, you're not wrong. But here's the thing, situations like this, they don't actually start big, they start small, subtle, almost harmless. A cone placed a few feet over the line, a casual suggestion to share, a smile that doesn't quite match the words. And most people, good people, tend to brush that off. We tell ourselves it's not worth the trouble, we don't want conflict, we want to be good neighbors. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes avoiding conflict is exactly what allows it to grow. Because people like Brent, they don't interpret silence as kindness. They interpret it as weakness, or worse, permission. The lesson here is not be petty, and it's definitely not escalate everything. It's about understanding where your boundaries are and being willing to stand on them early, clearly, and without apology. Because once someone convinces themselves that your space is negotiable, it becomes a whole lot harder to take it back. From a legal perspective, This whole situation could have gone very differently if I didn't have documentation. And I mean that, if I didn't have a proper deed, a certified survey, records that clearly outline my property lines. I would have been stuck in a gray area, and gray areas are where disputes drag on for years. So if you own property, or plan to, know your boundaries. Literally, have your paperwork in order. Because I thought it was mine doesn't hold up in court, but documented proof? That's everything. And here's another angle people don't talk about enough. This wasn't just a legal battle, it was a psychological one. This is a psychological trap that plays out more often than you think. Someone with a strong sense of entitlement walks into a shared environment and assumes they can reshape it to fit their expectations. Not because they're confused, but because they believe their version of better outweighs everyone else's reality. And when that belief gets challenged, that's when things turn aggressive, defensive, sometimes even irrational. You saw it with the cones, then the paving, then the lawsuit. Each step wasn't random. It was escalation driven by ego. And here's the part that might surprise you. I never actually needed to win emotionally. I didn't need to yell louder, or out-threaten him, or prove anything in the street. I just needed to stay consistent, stay within my rights, and let the system do what it's designed to do. That's something a lot of people overlook. Power doesn't always come from force. Sometimes it comes from patience and position. According to standard procedure, disputes like this are supposed to be handled through proper channels: documentation, legal review, enforcement. And when you trust that process, you don't have to resort to anything reckless. And yeah, I'll admit it, the mulch, the gravel, the porta potty, those were calculated moves. Not illegal, not destructive, just inconvenient enough to make a point. Because sometimes the only way people understand a boundary is when they physically run into it. But if you take anything from this story, let it be this. Respect isn't something you negotiate after it's been taken. It's something you establish from the start. And once it's tested, you respond, not emotionally, but deliberately. So now I'm curious, what would you have done? Would you have gone straight to court, or handled it the same way I did, step by step, making the situation impossible to ignore? And more importantly, where do you draw the line between standing your ground and going too far? Drop your thoughts below. I read more of those comments than you'd think. And trust me, some of you have stories that are just as wild as this one. And if you made it this far, you already know there's always another story, another neighbor, another line someone shouldn't have crossed.